call the meeting to order. And we have a script to read at the beginning of meetings now for the Zoom. So I will read that before we get started. And then I don't know, Alan, if you want to do a little explanation of why everyone's a co-host, etc. after I read this.
Yeah, happy to do that.
So, important notice regarding city council meetings, except this is not a council meeting, it's a city meeting, city committee meeting. This meeting is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with state of California executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Zoom is being utilized for this meeting. In case of technical issues, meetings will be uploaded to the city website as soon as possible after the meeting. We will be conducting today's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom. Committee and members and staff are participating from remote locations, practicing appropriate social distancing. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting by use of Zoom as noted on the city's website and on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to speak to the Climate Action Committee may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any kind, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment.
And so, Ken, I'll just do a little piece here about so given the Zoom bombing at the last meeting, I've decided to make everyone that's a part of the committee, the committee, a co-host, so that if we do have to mute everyone, you can unmute yourselves, and if something does happen again, you all have the power to report and remove someone as well. So if we ever do have a Zoom bomb, we can all be proactive in cleaning up the situation as quickly as possible. And this way, you guys can also share your screens as well for collaborating on something. It's easier to do it that way.
Just a question on that, Alan, because I don't understand that technically. So basically, if you make us co-hosts and you make it that nobody can unmute themselves, is that what it is? And only a co-host can do that?
Yeah. So if we do a mute all, that way that everyone can have this, all the committee members can still mute and unmute themselves, as well as report or remove a person who's speaking inappropriately.
Oh, so I didn't realize once you mute all that they can't come back in again. Okay.
Yeah. So once you mute all, you have to manually remove that option again.
So Alan, if you could then explain for all of our benefit and members of the public what the process will be when a member of the public is interested in participating in some way.
Yes. So if a member of the public is interested in participating during public comments, or if the chair decides to, if they're raising their hand, so essentially there's an option on Zoom to raise your hand on the bottom of your screen, or if you have video call, you can physically raise your hand to provide public comment. All right. Sorry, I just dropped my pen.
So just so everyone knows, now that you are co-hosts, all the members have the ability to do a mute all, and then that makes it not urgent that we remove people from the meeting, because I believe, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't want to click the remove button until we click the report button.
Correct. So that'd be the preferred option, because otherwise we have to physically.
Yeah. I know, too many lines are.
Dina, we can hear you. Yeah, so just if whoever gets to mute all first, that's fine, and then Alan or Carrie or Joshua or myself will do probably the reporting and removing, so that we make sure that happens in the right order, so that people get reported. And hopefully this will never be an issue, because it will never happen again, but we are prepared in case it does. So Alan, do you want to go ahead and do the roll call? And then I've asked Alan to provide our inspiration today, since it's his last meeting with us.
All right. So Lisa Pierce. Okay. Joshua. Present. Sonali.
Yes.
Thank you. Dina Allen. Sorry, Dina. I see you here, but can I just get a confirmation? One more time. All right. Dina, can you just confirm that you're present? All right, we'll come back to Dana in a minute. Woody Hastings,
I'm here.
Kenna Lee,
I'm here.
Alex Goodman,
Here.
Sarah Elliott,
Here.
Jerry Glazer, present. Diana Rich,
Yes.
Sarah Glade Gurney.
Here.
Luke Lindenbush did let us know that he will be absent today, so that's an excused absence. And I'm here, as well as the planning director, Carrie Swanson. For the inspirational quote, I have kind of two different quotes that I'm going to kind of piece together, as I think they tie in quite well. So the first quote's from Howard Zinn: "Small acts, when multiplied by millions of people, can transform the world." And the second quote is by Dr. Seuss: "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better." It's not. So it's kind of the fact that we're all here and we care, and we're all doing our small part to make the bigger change by caring.
Thank you so much. Those were wonderful.
All right, thank you.
So we do not have minutes to approve from the past meeting. Do we have any comments from the public regarding any items not on the agenda? Zeno, it looks like you're wanting to speak.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I had a question, kind of a follow-up on what Tanya Narat was talking about. I think it was last time. She made a report of the mobilization strategy that this group and the county has put together. So my first question, so this is a joint power authority, this group, which means my understanding is that it has different powers in the county, like the cities, the county government, and maybe some other agencies coming together and agreeing to share power. So I'd like to know what is the description of this power? Because each power agreement is kind of unique. It's a document. So what is this document? How have we shared this power? And the other thing, so we have the mobilization strategy that I think is accepted by the board of directors of this power agreement. So my question there is, what does it commit the city of Sebastopol to in terms of the details of that plan? So what are we supposed to do since we share power with this authority? Then my third question is, so I understand that that Tanya or other people in her office convene a staff meeting of people that work for different city governments in the area of climate protection. So who in Sebastopol is participating in that? And could that person maybe report to this committee? Because it seemed to be a pertinent kind of activity. So can we hear what is happening there? And then also the last thing, so I think Sarah Gurney is the director on this group, and she actually invited me to be a citizens enthusiast, or whatever the name is. And it would also be good, I think, to hear from
Don't worry, just take your time.
what is going on there, because this is the most detailed and comprehensive activity in which Sebastopol at the moment participate in the county around climate action. Thanks.
Sarah Gurney, are you able to answer some of these questions or address some of Zeno's concerns?
I can try. I'm not sure I got them all, Zeno, but let me just set out the structure as I know it, and let's see if this is helpful. The city of Sebastopol has this climate action committee. This is our very own committee that works for the city. the county has its own climate protection authority. That's the RCPA, the Regional Climate Protection Authority. And I'm the city's representative on that bigger group. And that group does its own work. Each city has a representative to that group. And let's see, each city in our county so far has done an emergency resolution about climate emergency. And many of our cities have their own citywide climate action committee. And the effort, particularly right now, is to connect the bigger regional effort better to the cities and the cities better to the regional effort, because the notion is that our regional coordination and collaboration will have a greater impact than each city doing its own thing. That's my simplest explanation, and I'm not sure it hits all your points because I'm not sure I got all the elements of your question.
Well, there was one key issue is when Sebastopol joined the authority, it must have signed an agreement about sharing power. And so my question was, what are the details of the agreement? So what kind of are we held to by being part of this county-wide effort of all the other cities and the county and some agencies? So it's kind of a legal question.
Yes, and I'm not sure I have the technical legal answer to that question. What I know is the RCPA was created by legislation by Mike McGuire, I believe, and each city was invited to that as well as the county. If there is a JPA document, I think I would need to search and find that specifically to give that to you to get the details of your answer, for your answer.
Okay, and then my question about staff meetings. So there's a staff meeting apparently happening regularly. And this is more a question for the whole committee here. As a public person, I think I would like to hear what the staff is up to. So if we report on this activity in the committee meeting, that would be one way to enter this into the public awareness.
So are you talking about an RCPA staff meeting?
A staff meeting of people that work for different cities in the area of climate activity, climate protection activity. That's what I heard from Tanya, like on last Thursday or Friday. And she repeated that this morning.
Yes, I think I'm going to ask Carrie to help me understand this question because I'm not sure, because I wasn't at that staff meeting, whatever Tanya said. So there's the RCPA staff that has its own meetings, and then there are different county-wide committees that involve staff members and citizens as well, different committees who do have meetings.
No, yeah.
Carrie, can you help with that answer, Carrie?
Can I throw in a clarification? Because I attended the meeting with Zeno today. And what we heard Tanya say was, yeah, each city has got staff members who are identified to meet with us on a regular basis and work with us. And I think part of his question is, who is the staff member? How often do they meet? And could they report to us?
Okay, my question is, what was the name of that committee meeting that you were at? Was that the TAC?
No, this was something entirely separate where she was a speaker and she was describing what RCPA does and how it does its job.
So tell me the name of the meeting that you were at, if you would, please.
It was the North Bay Forward.
That was a meeting that was not Tanya's meeting. She just gave a talk and we talked about this aspect of her work. I mean, the way it came up is that.
So I'm going to interrupt here for a minute because we're going over time on non-agendized items here. So I'm going to ask that some of these questions be, it looks like Lisa has had her hand up for quite a while. And I'm Carrie, if there was something that you or Alan wanted to say, but I think we can take these questions, and Sarah, would you be willing to follow up with Zeno about specific questions or bring kind of a report to next meeting about kind of how those structures exist to address that. But I'm going to recognize Lisa first and just let her say what she's been waiting to say.
Thank you. Yeah, it seems like this is really a question for the RCPA and not this committee. To me, it's just I'm feeling like we're taking an awful lot of time talking about this RCPA issue, and I know we have a lot to cover today, and I don't want us to get sidetracked.
Thank you. Carrie or Alan, was there something that you were wanting to say?
Just a quick answer. There's I believe it's about a monthly or so RCPA members and partners meeting that occurs. Staff, or I was the former, I guess I am current and soon to be former representative on behalf of Sebastopol.
Carrie, do we know who the next representative will be?
So we don't have a replacement for Alan yet. I will be trying to attend those. I will be honest, I'm not always going to be able to make them because I can't be in every place at a time, but I do get the invites to them. So if I'm available, I'll be attending those.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it's time to move to statements of conflict of interest. Are there any committee members who would like to make a statement of conflict of interest regarding anything on the agenda or not on the agenda that has to do with the work of this committee? I see no one raising their hand. All right, so we'll move on to the regular agenda. And the first thing there is already outdated, I believe. Woody, let me know that between putting this agenda out and today, there's been some change to what legislation is on the table, but I'll let Woody take it from here.
Thanks, Kenna. And I just dropped in the chat the legislation that is still relevant, which is SB 99. And this is a Senate bill by Assemblymember Bill Dodd, who's from our region. I think it might be helpful to share my screen. Do folks think that would be helpful so I could just sort of show? Yeah, I'll do that. So let's see here. Share screen. I think it should be this one. Yeah. And I will go to, that's not the one I wanted. This was the one I wanted. So this is actually what I'm showing here. And what I dropped in the chat is a link to a sign-on support letter from a bunch of organizations. You can see the organization I work for in the top left there, the Climate Center, a whole bunch of Bay Area and regional and statewide organizations. And this is a letter to the committee chair, Ben Hueso, committee of the Senate Energy and Utilities Commission. This is coming up in committee on April 19th. And what I want to point to are the two sort of key provisions and why I'm bringing this up for folks. And by the way, I really realized at some point along the way, this should probably go through the Energy Committee. You know, in the future, protocol-wise, I would sort of say, hey, Energy Committee, there's this bill, and it's sort of in your purview, and Energy Committee, our Climate Action Committee, Energy Subcommittee could sort of chew on it first and say, give a thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever. Anyway, the two provisions right here with the bold, this bill, you know, it's relevant to every, yes.
All I'm seeing at least is just the Word doc with the links in it. Is that what you're intending us to see?
No, you should
Scroll down.
see,
Scroll down.
no. Well, no, you shouldn't see that at all. I've got up on my full screen is
You may need to stop sharing and reshare again to that correct screen.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try that. Let's try that. Hold on a second here. Ding, ding, ding. So screen share. And let's see. This should be it right here. I don't want whiteboard. Okay, can you see all these logos now?
That looks, yes, now I see the logos.
Yeah, so a bunch of logos. That's typically the way we do it with the statewide coalition building stuff. Anyway, the key points here in the bill are that it would set up a program to provide resources to cities throughout the state of California to develop community energy resilience plans based on clean energy. That's the key provision. And ultimately applies to every city in the state. It prioritizes, should the most vulnerable communities. That's the second bullet there, but it provides resources to, would provide resources to every city and county. Counties are eligible to apply as well, local governments. So, given the last, 5 years of wildfires and, calamities and disruptions of this kind, that's part of the reason why the Climate Center is sponsoring this bill and wanting to move it forward so that folks aren't using diesel backup generators in these public safety power shutoffs and other unplanned outages, using diesel, which itself is dangerous and polluting and all that, using solar and storage and other sort of advanced clean energy technologies. So that's the gist of it. And so the suggestion would be that we would recommend to the City Council to support this bill. There was another bill. What Kenny was referring to was that there was AB 1325 that's somewhat along the same lines, but has a funding element in it. This particular bill, SB 99, doesn't have the funding element yet. It would, that would be sort of a follow-on, but this would set up the program and funding would come later. So it's just the one bill, and that's, so I'll stop there. Before we close out this item, though, I do want to talk about one more bill. It's not on the agenda tonight, so we'll not talk about it tonight, but for future reference. Can I call on hands now, or how does this work, Kenna? Through the chair, Jerry.
So Woody, a question on this. When we talked about energy, Kenna and Lisa and I about energy, and we talked with Cordell, we found that there's a lot of state and CPUC regulations, state regulations also, which make it difficult for us as a city to do a lot of these things. Does this bill also address those things, or is it just support? For instance, you can't run power lines between buildings, stuff like that.
Right. So this is, your question is very appropriate and very true. And this bill doesn't do everything. This is one piece of a larger puzzle where we are involved with, and in a perfect world, we would have a bill this year that talks about transforming some of those rules that prohibit the kind of lateral energy sharing that you'd want to be able to do. It's not this bill. It's not included in this bill. And the whole game of sometimes you just need to do it piece by piece, so you can get little bits, and then eventually you get everything you need. So this bill is just trying to fill one little piece, and it's cities and counties don't necessarily have the capacity or the resources or the technical chops or whatever they need. So it's designed to provide those resources to the cities. That's the piece here. Yeah. Other questions? Diana?
Go ahead, Diana.
Yeah, so it looks, I just want to make sure I understand the bill. It looks like it's not, what it's doing is just setting up the technical assistance grant program. It isn't prohibiting use of gas operated generators. It's just saying we're going to set up a technical assistance grant program that will encourage the use of environmentally appropriate alternatives. Is that basically what it is?
That's right. It's more the carrot than the stick. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question for you, Woody.
Sure.
Did you think that we need to write a letter to the council explaining why we're doing this, or are you looking more for just us to say we think this is something the council should do, and then we just hand that off to them?
So I would imagine, I don't have experience with the city of Sebastopol in relation to how it sort of, a lot of cities, you know, typically every legislative session will support or sometimes oppose legislation as it's wending its way through. And so I think for this committee, and this is the first time we're doing this, so it's a pathfinding endeavor. You know, I think the idea, my notion is that we would recommend to the city that the city write a letter, you know, when the time, and you know, when that letter might happen, who it goes to, where it's at in the process, what committee it might go to. It could just go to the author. You know, one simple way to do it is to submit a letter to the author saying, we like your bill, we support your bill, and that can go in the record. The other way is to get it to the committee and it gets into the bill analysis, and it's you know, the city of Sebastopol shows up in the committee analysis as a supporter of the bill. So, you know, our role would be to I think, you know, would be to recommend, and I turn to the council members here or the city staff as to what the appropriate thing to do is. But my thought is that it would be a recommendation from the Climate Action Committee to the city council to submit a letter of support for the bill.
And do either of our council members want to comment on how that would work from your end? Go ahead.
I'd just like to ask an additional question about timing before we answer that question. Each of these bills have a time frame within which things have to happen. So what is our deadline for the city council sending a letter in? At what point does it kind of become meaningless in the bill timeline?
Yeah, well, it'll become meaningless if the bill dies in the committee on the 19th. It's too late to get a letter in, you know, in time for it to be in the bill analysis for that committee. But you know, it's got if it can stay alive, it's got a ways to go. It's still in its house of origin. We're still sort of early in the legislative session. It's going to go from the Senate side over to the Assembly side. So certainly could get a letter in when it goes over to the Assembly, letting the Assembly know that you know, the first committee it goes to in the Assembly, which would probably be the Assembly Energy Committee, you know, sending it to that committee, and that'll probably be sometime in like May, probably June, before they go on recess.
Okay, thanks. And so I think Sarah's prepared to give us the basic timeline here.
Yes, I can give this timeline. Our meetings are on Tuesdays. The packet is released the Thursday before that. So for any material to be in the packet, it needs to be prepared the Thursday before that Thursday. So you can see we have about a 10 or 12 day lead time for anything to get on the council, into the council's agenda and packet. The council also has a legislative representative to the League of Cities. I believe that's now Council Member Hinton. Diana's nodding her head. And so we get ledge material from that person, assuming they are able to attend the meetings and come forward with a recommendation. It would be very appropriate for this group, if it wanted to ask the council to send a letter in support or opposition, and for this group to submit the reasons why. Either this group, Diana, or myself, or all of us could put that on the agenda.
And then I've been told, and Carrie, maybe you can clarify, since Alan, I guess you're stepping in for Alan, at least in the short term. What is the deadline, Carrie, for a staff report going to Mary in advance of the planned city council meeting? Mary had told me that her best case scenario is 3 weeks before the city council meeting. But could you let us know how that would work?
Sure. So for staff, our staff reports are due to city management 2 weeks prior to the meeting. So they have we have a week to review and make any edits and adjustments that are needed before agendas are generally finalized, so that you can prepare the agenda, numbering, and all that kind of stuff the week before it goes out. So in order for staff to have time, and obviously the Val meeting will have a strain on our staff resources, getting that if possible the week before would be great, so that, you know, if it's 2 weeks before the meeting is when my report is due. I need some time to be able to get that into or tweak any of the language and make any edits. We can provide to this group the staff report or the agenda report template. So there's, items like the date of the meeting and just, that will cut down on some formatting. In terms of a letter for council, usually what is helpful, it would be really helpful from this group with your expertise, is to have a draft letter for them to review. But he's nodding his head, so it sounds like he's prepared to do something like that for this. And then the staff report, that can be an attachment to the report as a separate document, but the staff report explains why you're supporting it, what action the CAC took on which meeting date, that type of thing, which is the information that council needs to kind of understand where it's coming from and the context of it.
So are our options at this point to either, so we're going to table this and draft a letter that then we would approve at our next meeting and send on, or to just somebody make a motion to say, we'd like to recommend that the city support this, and we're, there's members of the committee who are available to help draft this letter. Are those kind of the options on the table as far as somebody from council or city can answer?
Yeah, I would say that those are the options. Jerry's nodding his head there, but yes, it sounds like the best case scenario is for there to be someone from this committee that works on drafting a proposed letter, and that letter be put into a staff report. We'd need to work with Carrie. Sarah and I could work with Carrie to figure out, given the current staffing situation, the best way to handle that. Sarah and I might be able to do a staff report ourselves, draft that up, work with Carrie to the extent it's necessary, and then submit it to the city council. Sarah would get us on the agenda. And just keep in mind that, the city council meetings are on the first and third Tuesday evening of each month. But that would be the process. Jerry, I know you have a comment, but I'm just wondering if someone could address whether, given the what Woody said in his initial comments, it might be smart to ask our subcommittee that's kind of looking at these issues to look at this. But that's my answer.
Jerry, and then Sarah, is your hand still up? Okay, so Jerry, go ahead.
So my comment's a more generalized one. It's not on this particular bill. As being the climate committee, I think we have a responsibility that before we send anything forward, that we investigate it and that the members actually read the legislation, not just the one paragraph summary, and that when we send a recommendation to the council, we have a list of reasons why we think that this is good or it's not good. We have a very small staff in Sebastopol. That means that as volunteers, part of our responsibility or part of what we should be doing is, if I was in Sunnyvale where I could turn to 40 people in the planning department and say, hey, we think this was interesting. They send 2 people off to read the legislation. They call the people in the state, and they would do the entire analysis and write it up and report back to the Sustainability Commission. But we don't have that. So part of our job is to go do the grunt work. And I think we need some time to do the grunt work, but it does mean read the legislation. The exception to that was something that Lisa brought to us the last time, which I thought was perfectly acceptable, and said, we believe this kind of thing ought to be investigated. And that's essentially the recommendation we sent to the council. This kind of thing should be investigated because, and it should work at a state level instead of a city level. But when we actually have legislation, I think we should be reading the legislation, doing a little bit of a review that Woody's already done, but the rest of it should get a little bit more than the summary that he sent. So I would table this, and I would see that we would get the material, look at it, and we bring it up in the next meeting.
All right, thank you. That's a good perspective. Sarah, and then Woody, did you want to say something after Sarah?
Woody, I think you're after me. I'll just make it really simple. Jerry's just right. We have a very small staff. So if you think the council meets the first and third Tuesdays, just know that the Wednesday morning after, the forward agendas are organized. So if this group wants to get anything on agenda, it's pretty good to know about that no later than the Tuesday meeting day, because gives you about 2 weeks lead time to get in the packet. So let me say that simply. The council meets on the first and third Tuesdays. So if this group wants something on the agenda, you have to know either the first or third Tuesday to get on the subsequent agenda, assuming there's room on that agenda. And assuming the item is not highly controversial. Room means staff time to prepare and also discussion time on the agenda. That's about the shortest explanation I can give of our process.
And then we also do, I believe, and Sarah or Diana, please correct me, that we now have a quarterly presentation slot for this committee to present to council.
I know Sarah had proposed that. I'm not sure whether that actually got formalized.
Okay.
But Sarah?
We'll have to look on the forward agendas. Diana, I'm thinking there is a May date, but I don't want to say a particular date without confirming that formally on the forward agendas. Yes, the idea was that this group could report, and the time limit is kind of like a 10-minute report, something pretty brief, just to keep this group in a good communication with the council.
All right, thank you. Woody?
Thanks. First, yeah, I just wanted to say I agree with everything Jerry said about scrutinizing anything that we would, recommend to the city council. We should all actually read the bill. I thought about sending it to everyone, but then I remembered the Brown Act stuff and I wasn't quite sure what to do. I think I was supposed to send it to Alan, but I didn't get to it. Anyway, I just dropped it into the chat. So the bill text is there in the chat if you want to click on that and hang on to it. And then the other thing I wanted to say was that to help expedite things when we are ready to go, we do have sample letters, template letters, a fact sheet, plenty of stuff that makes it easy to get that letter together. So happy to help with that.
Yes, Diana?
Yeah, I just took a quick look at the calendar here, just trying to figure out a timeline when you guys are thinking about this. If in fact this topic is addressed on our April 28 Climate Action Committee meeting, the next possible city council meeting would be on Tuesday, May 18. That would be slightly less than 3 weeks from the April 28 meeting. And the next one would be on Tuesday, June 1. So if you think about the timeline, the easy target would be the city council meeting on June 1 to have this considered by the city council and addressed. And if Sarah or Carrie, I got that wrong, please correct me, but May 18 would be pushing it. That means that at our April 28 meeting, we would basically have to be ready with a form letter and all of the points that Jerry was talking about, the explanation, the content that would go into the staff report and hand it off. But waiting until the June 1 city council meeting would give us a lot more leeway. Thanks.
Sarah?
Thank you. I just checked. Mary has May 18th as a potential report date from this group, August 3rd and November 2nd. So this action letter could either go into a May 18th regular report date with a request for discussion and action following a presentation, an updating presentation, or separately, as Diana is suggesting, to the later meeting.
And I might add that even if you plan the June 1 city council meeting, the May 18 meeting is kind of a really great opportunity to kind of tee it up.
Yeah. So Sarah's your hand up again?
Nope, I'm lowering my hand.
Sorry. So the energy subcommittee, the energy working group is meeting tomorrow evening. And it seems like, Woody, if you would be willing to send to, now is it Carrie instead of Alan? Alan, are you still around for the next couple of days? A letter template and the bill text to Alan, then he could distribute that to the group and post it to the document library. And then Energy Committee working group could take a look at those tomorrow evening and move it forward for a presentation of a letter at the next meeting, and everyone would have had a chance to review the text of the legislation. That sound good to everyone? Anyone have any other suggestions or something that you want to say before we move on to the next agenda item? Is there a member of the public who'd like to address this agenda item before we move on? Yeah, go ahead, Zeno. Oh, you're muted.
So I wonder how this issue that we're discussing applies to this commission itself. Because the announcement is very meager, and there's no package, and there's no explanatory text of what is going to be discussed. And although the Brown Act doesn't really give a lot of guidance in detail, there's a huge experience in California around Brown Act and what you're expected to provide the public so it can prepare. So I would encourage the agenda to have a package.
So we are
also support it, and would support the work of the committee also.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we're doing our best to get materials out at the pace that we can as a group of otherwise busy volunteers. So the public is getting access to everything that the committee is getting access to. And so we will continue doing our best, and hopefully we will get into some better patterns of getting stuff out before the deadline. We're just still learning how early that actually is. Go ahead, Diana.
Yeah, I actually wanted to confirm that that's exactly what's happening here. It's being agendized. Thank you, Zeno, but it is being agendized for this very next meeting, and the committee, the Energy Committee, will be looking at it. And the plan, as been discussed here, is to provide substantial detail and rationale for supporting it along with the draft letter. So I think we're on track. Thanks.
Yes, but it's good to have our watchdogs, and we appreciate you. So moving on to our next regular agenda item, which is the equity framework draft, which was brought up to the last meeting with the request that the different working groups just look at it and interact with it a little bit and provide some guidance. And our goal today, just for clarity, we're not trying to finalize this document today. We're trying to get more input. We're actually not planning to finalize this document until we fill our EJ seat, if we can fill that seat, and get the input from that person. So by EJ, I mean environmental justice, just to be clear. But we would really like input from anyone that has spent some time with either or the statement of principles and the checklist, and has anything to add, anything they'd like to add into that. And unfortunately, I got a little behind today and do not have it queued up to screen share. So if there's anyone that does have those documents queued up and could screen share them, that would be great.
I actually have it handy and could screen share it. So give me a moment. Let's see here. Should be.
And I think, Woody, between amongst us, we can probably lead a quick discussion about some modifications to this, because I don't know that anyone will have had time to really focus on.
Yeah. Okay. And can people see, it should say Sebastopol Climate Action Committee, Climate Justice Equity Principles Checklist. Is that what you see? Good. I saw thumbs up. Good. Okay.
And Dina, I don't know if you're able to really interact from your phone, but I know you had some good points and comments. if you're out there.
She did.
So,
For me?
Yes.
Oh, hallelujah. I thought I was in Twilight Zone here. I guess my main comment was just looking to the future, that you have a lot of explanation and detail, and I like that, but I feel that a lot of us want something simple without sentences when we go to check up a decision or a policy or an idea. So kind of have a very simple chart, flow chart, matrix, whatever, that kind of summarizes all your very detailed, good information.
Can I speak to that?
Oh, please, 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 Woody, Diana, lead the discussion all you want on this section.
Sure, I'll speak to that, and thank you, Dina. Yes, and so I think a couple things. I think we somewhere along the way we decided to have a set of principles. That's one document, which is this one up here, with the fat paragraphs, and then a checklist which is shorter. And I think Dina's suggestion is really good, that once we get it to a point where we want to actually have a checklist that has little boxes where you could check off. I mean, it might even be in the form of a Google form or something that you'd just pull up, and you can pull it up anytime, and you can click off the things and share it easily and all that. Or it could, whatever, be some other, it would be, but I agree that it would be something that is maybe in a table form or a spreadsheet form, and it's pretty clear that there's a limited number. It doesn't go on forever. I think right now we've got 7 with a question mark about any others. And so I agree with that. I think just in the way we started it out, it was just writing them out and not thinking about the format so much. I think the other suggestion, though, Dina, that you had offered was the idea of trying to have the principles, which are, again, these up here, kind of line up a little bit better with the checklist. And I looked at that a little bit. It might be tough, but what we could at least do, if we can't have them line up perfectly, like 1-to-1, each of the checkboxes could have like a little parens that refers back to what principle it is, that why do we have that on the checklist? And it could refer back to one or more of the principles that we've set for ourselves. So that's the thinking there. And then just to round out what we've got here, the final section of this is just sort of a section on resources. And we had really just gotten to start on this, and it's mostly just links to organizations that work in this arena, so on a daily basis. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, so Diana, and then Jerry, and then Sunali.
I think Jerry had his electronic hand up first, so go, Jerry.
Okay, just a couple of comments. And this was sent to us a couple of meetings ago, so I went through it. And curiously, I'd also gone through the material from Petaluma earlier for working on the CAP. And I recognized that most of this is exactly the same thing they have, and probably we cribbed it from them. But the problem I had with it is, in part what Dina said, if we're looking at something, and it's from my discussions with Zeno that I've gotten to recognize this, it really does need to be in a checklist format that says you check this thing. And a good example is I have solar panels, and we say everybody should get solar panels. Okay, so all the rich people get solar panels. So all the people who can't afford solar panels suddenly have very much more expensive utility bills because somebody has to pay for the infrastructure. And the same thing happens with gasoline and electric cars. You have to have larger gas taxes to pay for the roads because we have electric cars. In the checklist, when we looked at something where we would push something, we may not stop from doing it, but we'll recognize that the implication is there. But I think it needs to be a checklist, and then we are doing something different than saying we comply with. we're doing something very much like what happens with CEQA. We are writing down and saying, we recognize that this impact will occur and such, and how could we get around that or mitigate that? Because every one of the things that we're going to suggest will have some implication on some community. And it's the recognition of it, not the fact that we're necessarily going to eliminate it and then compensating for it. And I don't think this list allows us to do that.
Okay, I think I'm next.
Yeah.
So in terms of discussion, I think one thing that Ken and Woody and I were hoping to get out of this discussion was some input on the actual provisions. So we have the overall principles page, we have a checklist, and it's great to hear validation here. That's where we need to go in terms of the checklist. But we've outlined here some categories of populations that we feel would potentially have an impact from policies that this group might recommend. And so there's Indigenous people listed here. There's the Latino or Latinx community listed here. So if you could, when you're looking at it, for instance, at the last meeting, someone identified, called out renters. I mean, there's a group that can be heavily impacted. You know, they aren't listed in a group of anti-discrimination laws, but renters can have big impacts from policies that encourage environmentally appropriate moves. So I would love to hear from this group as you look at that policy, you know, or just call out if you think kind of that would be a good process. What are, you know, just like, you know, brainstorming, what are the groups that might have a negative impact from climate action policies? You know, I'm writing down renters, but what other ones?
And before we move to straight brainstorm, Sunali had a comment or question.
Oh, I guess that was my comment. One, Dina, I agree with you, and I like really how you thought to mitigate that by listing it off. That's a great idea. And the group that I saw that was missing from the list were the youth. I think so often we're making policies about the future that's going to impact them, and we don't give them enough credit to invite them into the conversations. So that was, yeah.
And Diana, is your hand up?
No.
Okay. So does anyone have any other groups they've thought of or even considered? I mean, there's no right and wrong here, no?
I'll pitch one in that kind of helps cross two items for me, because I did want to mention another piece of legislation from that last one, which was a bill that's by our own Assembly member Mark Levine that would work on advancing electric vehicle charging for apartment buildings, you know, renters. And so that's one that I also think we should support, and I'll follow up with that later. But I think we might be missing, you know, equitable transportation, equitable mobility options, you know, and really advancing what they call active mobility now. So, you know, walking and biking, but making it possible for folks who maybe have limited mobility options to have more options. I'm not so sure we had that in there, so we might want to make sure we're, you know, if we're looking at transportation policy, it really should be transportation policy that helps everyone and not just has, say, EV charging for Teslas. I mean, to give an extreme example. So I would pitch that in there.
Thank you. Anyone else have any groups or segments of our population?
I think that's very helpful. And actually, Woody, the transportation question, I mean, yeah, because it captures, what about commuters? You know, what about people who may not be in another protected class, but you make transportation and commuting more expensive, and that in effect affects them. Shouldn't we be considering those working people too? So yeah, I think all that helps. Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Jerry.
I just want to reemphasize the one point. You're focusing on the communities. I'm more focused on the process. We can identify and make a list of all the communities, but if there isn't some action we go through, the activity we go through, recording that we do, then these are nice. We read them, we nod our heads and say, yeah, we consider all of that. I think we actually need to be saying, we write down the impacts in each case, or we say no impact. And we've made an assessment. And so it's not just the communities, it's writing down and acknowledging what each one of the things we recommend will result in. It's going to be favorable in some cases, it's going to be negative in other cases. And I think a document that gets us there is closer to and more about equity than just identifying the communities.
Yeah, Diana and Woody, you both look like you have something to say about Jerry's
I'll
comment,
defer to Woody. Go, Woody.
Okay, so I think if I'm hearing you right, Jerry, I would respond by saying, right, the purpose of the checklist would be to ensure that policies that we're promoting or recommending to the city council have been vetted through an equity lens, and that we would actually, on some of these policies, not put them forward because they really just are not appropriate. So I think that's the purpose, in my view, is to have a checklist that if it's not, abiding by our principles, we wouldn't suggest a given policy.
Yeah, but Woody, the point that I'm trying to make, and I think it's not fitting. They are good policies. Every policy has impacts, and some of the impacts will always be negative. What I'm saying is, we don't decide whether to have the policy or not. In many cases, should we promote electric vehicles? I can give you 100 reasons. And I'm the president of the North Bay Electric Auto Association, as you know. Okay. Should we not promote electric vehicles because of the impacts that they'll have on the Latino community that works out in the fields? No, we should just acknowledge that that's the case and see if there's some mitigation that we can put in place that will work to make that lesser of a concern. Okay, and I think that's the working document that we want to have, the one that forces us to do that, as opposed to simply use it in the evaluation as a yay or nay. It's not a checklist. It's a work document.
Yeah, so Jerry, I think what you're encouraging is some of what Dina brought forward, which I think that Woody and Diana and I would be happy to kind of go back and revisit, which is, instead of a checklist, making more of a matrix that has to be filled out, and that could have columns for, what do you see as the potential downsides for this particular population? What are the benefits to this population? What members of this population were involved at what stages of this discussion, et cetera, and where we have to actually write that out for each thing so that the process is recorded and therefore attended to a little bit more deeply. Joshua and Diana both have hands up, and I'm not sure who's went up first, but Joshua, you haven't spoken yet, so I'm for you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we're getting to the point where we're starting to echo and summarize what we're saying, which I think is a good place to be. So I'm going to try to keep it brief. Something that came to me was related to the economic costs and the people who are going to be, dealing with the brunt of any given policy. On the checklist discussion draft, I have representatives of the labor community been consulted regarding, which I'm assuming that's getting to that question of who's sort of bearing the costs of these moves if they become policy. And I would suggest, sort of in line with what other people are saying here, that for each thing we put forth, we try to analyze it in terms of where are the greatest benefits going to accrue from this, where are the possible negative effects, and who might that affect, rather than this sort of frames it as like, have we checked in with everybody we can think of to make sure that they think this is a good idea, which would be an exhaustive process. But from my point, sort of in alignment with Jerry, it's more like, if this policy happens, who stands to gain the most and who stands to have the hardest time with it? Do we have a way to alter the manifestation or the implementation in a way that can ameliorate those negative effects, and just make sure that the benefits are more equitably spread and the costs are more equitably distributed in some fashion. So just that.
Thank you. Diana?
Nope, everyone's covered it. Thanks.
Great. So I think, go ahead, Woody. You're muted.
Yeah. This is raising a question for me. What is the status of the equity seat? I thought maybe that was going to be on the agenda today. It's not. And is that already going to City Council, opening up the application? Okay, I see a nod. So that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we approved the requesting the City Council last meeting, and City Council is bringing that forward. I think you guys got it on the agenda, yes?
It'll be on next Tuesday's agenda.
Perfect.
Great, thank you so much.
So I think, go ahead, Diana.
Yeah, just a quick comment. There was a question about the cover letter and whether this committee could use a cover letter that was individually, Woody, this was a question that you came up with. Woody drafted a letter that we could use individually in reaching out to encourage applicants. And the answer I got back was yes, that could be an individual letter used by this committee. It didn't need to be pre-approved by the City Council.
So just to clarify, you're saying that once the City Council reopens applications, then we could use that letter, because we haven't officially reopened applications, correct? Yeah, so we'll report back next meeting on the status of if applications are open, and then we could use the letter to recruit applicants, correct? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you would only want to use the letter once it's opened back up, because then you can include, when you send it to your friends and contacts, whatever, it'll include all the official application materials that, yeah.
Okay. Sarah Gurney, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say this group can recruit members with or without a letter, individually or by group. If you want people to know, they need to know, and the more publicity we can do about opportunities, the better. The wider the field, the more inclusive.
Great, thank you. So I think I'm going to close discussion on this agenda item because it sounds like we've gotten some great input from members of the committee, and can go back to working group to refine. Are there any members of the public who want to address this agenda item before we move on? All right, so moving on, I believe now, Alan, the floor is to you for a staff update on the all-electric reach code.
Thank you for that. I think Carrie may also join in a little bit, but in a short summary, we want to give you kind of an update where it's at. So a while ago, we did take this to a department meeting just to kind of get feedback from other relevant departments. And there was a handful of concerns regarding it. I think Lisa may have forwarded some of them on, but let me see if I can just pull my notes real quick. Okay. So some of the concerns that were just mentioned and brought up, and we want to just run it by with the Climate Action Committee, is there's concerns regarding the PSPS shutdowns or shutoffs, as these are going to be going on for the foreseeable future. And currently gas is acting as an alternative for heating, cooking, and power during these events. There's also concerns that the evacuations are lifted, but the PSPS is still, or in case of a fire, fire and evacuation. If the evacuation orders are lifted, people are returning, but there's no electricity because the PSPS is still in effect. People are still returning back to dark homes without power or ability to cook. It's also, there's uncertainty of solar battery backup. So if solar/battery backup systems would be required in the future, as well as concerns regarding potential economic hardships on businesses such as restaurants or glass blowers if they're required to go with electric only. There's also concern with all-electric reach code and if there would be prohibitions on backup generators. And this was a conversation with planning, building, fire, and the police department, just as a heads up. So those are some of the concerns that were raised by city departments that we wanted just to make sure that the committee is aware of. And Carrie, do you have anything else to add on to that?
Yeah, I think that was a great rundown of the list. And so, and actually it complements the prior discussion about equity or unintended consequences. And I think one of the couple things that came up fall into the two categories. One is the economic development side of it, that, most restaurants will want gas cooking. They just can't do the scale or the specialty cooking that they're trying to do with electric. And in residential, if you have someone who's trying to do some good cooking, unless they can afford a Gaggenau induction heater top, which I can tell you, in terms of a cost, is like, I wanted to get one, I couldn't afford it. So it's the cost of that when you're talking about equity and what the price would be, alternative to, and how that would impact people. But from an economic development standpoint, this community has traditionally supported a really healthy artist community, including pottery, glass blowers, and metal workers. And all of those tend to use gas because of the types of process they're doing. They can't be done with electric, or at least they can't currently be done with electric. So that's sort of the economic development side of things that could potentially be impacted in terms of new businesses coming into town or people trying to expand businesses. The other side of it is, it's the safety in this current time of the power shutoffs. And I was one of those people who I had to stay in town during the last the evacuation and PSPS, where power was out for a week. I have solar, but I did not have battery backup because of the cost of the time. And the only way I could take a bath was to frankly heat water on my stove. Because I was here as an emergency worker without power. And obviously there's, I'm not talking about for myself, but for people, the city has permitted the year after that, probably about a dozen generators that are powered by natural gas as a way for people to try to have that resiliency in their home. And so we do have some concerns that those types of how people are dealing with climate change. I understand it's sort of a catch-22 of you use more gas, you affect the climate, and how can we move past that? And I know some communities have actually done the REACH code more on an incentive basis, but we did want to bring those back. And that's something where in a staff report, we would want to highlight those issues for the council to have full consideration of it. And so those were brought up, and I wasn't able to attend that meeting, but as Alan said, that was brought up by the police chief, the fire chief, and some others in the conversation.
Jerry.
And it's one of those things where I'm just not sure that this. I know Alan had highlighted at the meeting that he thought staff might have some concerns, and that's his job to sort of kind of go, wait a second, there might be that big red, unintended consequence button that we should make sure that people are thinking about. So I don't know if those were discussed when this was last discussed by this committee.
Jerry, and then Lisa. And Diana, I didn't see you, but so you'll be after Lisa.
And I might take more than my 3 minutes. I'm really disappointed. Lisa did a great job in authoring the letter and explaining why to do this at a state level and what ought to be examined. It didn't say go make these changes. It said go investigate these. Let's have a code as part of Title 24. And that makes some sense. And that would look at all of the pieces. The state wouldn't just go ahead and say, we're going to go do this. The city of Petaluma, the city of Sunnyvale, the city of San Jose, multiple cities in the state of California have already put in REACH codes, and they recognize that there's an awful lot that needs to be done as a result of putting that in place. You can't just put it in place and say, boom, okay, turn off all the gas. It is for new construction. It talks about the infrastructure changes that need to be done that follows with that, which would make the batteries acceptable, having battery backup for electric. I have induction. It didn't cost me that much compared to the gas. And the guy who lived here before me did pottery and he used electric for the pottery. But there's other alternatives and doesn't stop gas from going to those applications. It makes it not a fundamental part of what we do in every building. And I think Lisa did a great job in her authoring, and I'm disappointed that it didn't go to the council so that you could bring the objections of staff to the council and not back to us, because our recommendation was it be examined and that the council have a chance to look at this. And that's where the place where staff should have put their input and not back to us and stop it from going to council. And I'm disappointed about
Jerry,
that.
I'm going to interrupt you because the intent isn't that we're saying, no, we're not going to bring it forward to council. And I actually discussed this with Diana as the council liaison, and we didn't want to bring it forward without the CAC knowing about those issues that we felt were important to raise for council's consideration.
Carrie, we're not stupid. Come on. I mean, you think you guys could dream that stuff up? We live in that world.
Gary, let's have a sense of civility here.
Okay.
So, no, Gary, calling someone, suggesting anyone is stupid is not civil.
I didn't say that. I said we're not stupid.
Okay. No, Jerry, you know what I'm saying. So I'm sorry. I shouldn't be controlling this meeting. Kenna, it's your meeting, but
that's okay. I think it's just getting a little heated, and
well, I wasn't meaning to be heated. What I'm trying to establish is how we operate. Okay, and how we operate is we did have a discussion about it, and we did have a vote on it, and that was the determination. And that vote should have been sent forward.
Jerry,
and I know they're not going to stop it. Okay.
Well, just hold on. I want to acknowledge and appreciate the city staff for bringing the concerns back to this committee, because they were things that were not discussed at this committee previously when we made the decision to send that on. So, you know, while it's frustrating for the timeline to kind of get slowed down, it also is important. And I think this committee is really putting forward, and I appreciate the city staff recognizing that this committee is really asking for, an equity approach to every issue. And especially given that we haven't had our matrix and principles in place for things that we have already sent through to be evaluated by, I think this is an important process to us to participate in. So I'd like to recognize Diana at this point to comment on whatever you were going to comment on.
Yeah, I just want to say that I actually have a completely different perspective. I look at how the letter that Woody, I think this group is learning its process. And so, yeah, it's this letter. So what we've learned from this process and from looking at, and from the discussion that spun off from Woody proposing the support for the legislation that he mentioned earlier, is that providing research so that there's an explanation and a rationale and the issues are addressed, along with, and this is actually, Jerry, right down your alley, along with a draft letter, is the way to go for this group, because this group wants to feel confident that the recommendations that it gives to the city council are well researched. I personally, although I was really impressed by the letter and the conviction that was behind the letter that Lisa put forth to this committee, I was kind of confused about what the actual legislation was and what the implications were. So that's not a criticism of Lisa. It's a criticism, it's an observation about this group learning what its tasks are. So I see that letter as one step. And then I look at what happened today with the legislation that Woody was talking about, and a process that has now been put in place to have a better result, and actually informed substantially, Jerry, by your input and the way you think about these things. And I see this as a huge success, especially in the context of talking about the equity issues. I mean, Carrie was talking about stuff and I was writing down economic impact, people who can't afford gas alternative. Oh yeah, that's right, Jerry, that's where we would put the fill in blank. And we would go, okay, what could we do to mitigate that issue? People who rely on gas for restaurant or creative work. Oh, again, you fill in the blank. And as Jerry said, how do you mitigate that? Or do you just accept it and then I wrote down, needed more info to support it. I mean, guys, this is an amazing, pivotal growth moment for all of us. So, I mean, so anyway, I see it as just an incredible opportunity. And I don't think we should abandon this letter, Jerry. I think Lisa is going to tell us how we can make it work here. So I'm going to shut up. Thanks. Bye.
I just want to say one thing about all I wanted to say is this. The REACH code itself, and Lisa will probably jump in and say exactly what she intended, but it was not to turn everything off. It was to investigate it for Title 24. There was a lot that was investigated for Title 24 that didn't show up in it because it was either technically difficult to do or it would be very expensive for people to do. And so it didn't show up in the code in 2010, but it's showing up in 2020.
So let's recognize Lisa and let her speak for herself.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I recognize that I really wish that I had explained more of what Title 24 changes were proposed and what Title 24 does, because I think there was a lot of misunderstandings maybe. This is only for residential, Title 20, this particular thing. It does not apply to restaurants or businesses. It's only for new construction. The all-electric REACH component there's several different gradations of it, shall we say. There's all electric ready, which means that everything has to be wired in new houses to be ready for that, but you can still use gas, and all the way to what Petaluma just passed or is in the process of passing, which is no new gas for new construction, period. So they're kind of way on the other extreme of all electric ready in the range. But Title 24, the California Energy Commission is really thorough in all the very subtle things that they investigate and finally decide on. And they have a lot of pressure from, let's face it, a lot of corporations and businesses and people, especially developers, are fighting this. So in terms of costs, it's generally not any more expensive you can buy a cheap electric stove, a cheap electric water heater. It costs less if you don't have to bring gas into a new house. So it's, as far as that goes, the main thing that I think is the drawback with not having gas going into new construction is the generators, because that's a real concern around here. You can still have propane and gasoline generators, but they're not as safe. So as far as hot water heaters, and the only real things that are going to be impacted, generally speaking, with our power shutoffs are gas water heaters and gas stoves, because generally it's going to be in the summertime, right, that we're going to be losing our power for a long time. But so on-demand gas heaters, water heaters, excuse me, which a lot of people have on-demand water heaters, those require electricity. And there's also a lot of gas stoves that require electricity. So, you know, we're kind of whittling down on what we're going to really lose if we don't have gas going to the new homes. So what else? Solar is already required in Sebastopol for new residential and commercial construction. Home battery systems are not required under Title 24. However, having a home battery system can allow you to reduce the size of your solar system. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of clear some of that stuff up. But it's probably, to be honest, the timeline was for individuals, the April 19th, and for agencies, it was a little later, but it's a little unclear. So I think we missed the boat with this letter anyway. But now we're going to have this issue before us of, are we going to do something as a city? And it looks like that Title 24 that's going to be passed, that's going to come in January of 2022, may be a little on the lightweight side, may be more like leaning towards all electric ready instead of doing anything more dramatic. So anyway, that's it for me.
Lisa, thank you so much for all of the time and research that you've put into not only understanding this issue, but being able to explain it to the rest of us. It's really amazing and very much appreciated.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't do more education to clear up some of those misunderstandings from the get-go, because I think we could have, I'm learning. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, we are definitely all learning together. Jerry, go ahead.
One of the reasons why I supported it at the time, in Sunnyvale, I went through the plastic bag thing. I went through the styrofoam containers. In both cases, the city of Sunnyvale got sued. Within 6 months, the state of California said, okay, no more plastic bags, and then the styrofoam starts showing up as well. And at that point, the lawsuits all disappeared. That's the reason why when Lisa said this, I go, that's exactly the right way to do it. It takes us as a city off the hook. We should support that kind of thing because it is the future and it's the place where it's going to be. And Carrie, by the way, for everybody who thought about the backup with the gas, I fly my airplane. It's 70 years old. It has an electric system and has a vacuum system. Why does it have the two systems? Well, what if one of them went out? We're going to need the backup system. There's not a new airplane made today that uses the vacuum system any longer. Instead, there's backups and contingencies and everything else for the electric system. And that's the same thing that the REACH code would end up doing as well. And Title 24 has been a mainstay in the state and it's done a really great job so far. It makes houses so you don't need energy in the house anymore if you do it the right way. And that's where we need to be going to. So I thought it was the right time and the right place. And I'm sorry that we slowed down the process.
Well, I just want to go back to what Diane is saying is that we are learning as a committee and you guys managed to get yourselves a chair who is very unfamiliar with how these processes all work. So I am very much on the steep learning curve and figuring out, what documents we need to get to whom, when, and where. And we'll keep getting better at it. I'm committed and I share a lot of you guys' sense of urgency around this, but I know that we move at the speed that we're capable of moving at any given time. So bear with me and bear with each other and let's just try to be as urgent and efficient and compassionate as we all can be. Sarah, did you have something to say?
Well, I would just add, thank you, Kenna. As we figure out the process to get items before the council, this group also wants to be very aware of the importance of having a presentation to go along with those agenda items and having a number of this group come as speakers, as advocates for the position this group is wanting to put on the agenda. So it's not just the timeline to get on the agenda, it's the whole follow through so that the council has the deep understanding that this group has. For instance, has Lisa just went through all those points deeper than the letter? It's all got to get in front of the council with as much voice as possible to be successful in advocacy.
So I believe that we do not have any action to take for this agenda item. Are there any members of the public who want to comment on this particular agenda item before we move on?
Yeah, just quick. I think there is a lack of attention to passive solar, passive wind. So how can we reduce the energy need of a home? I mean, all for electrifying the house, but how can we design, how can we put things in REACH code that make the house less in need of energy? I think Sebastopol is a great area in which we could push more siting, passive solar, interesting ideas about how to cool the house because we have great wind here from the ocean. So that's kind of what I just wanted to add to this conversation. Another layer of complexity, not just electrifying everything, but also harvesting the energy that's available in Sebastopol without going through solar electrification. Thank you.
Zeno. And Sunali, you had something? Oh, that was a mistake. Okay. So we'll be moving on from this agenda item, and we are very near the end of our time today. So this gas station upgrade we will table until next meeting. I have nothing from the chair reports. I know that I believe, Sunali, you were hoping to present. Can you give us a 1-minute teaser for for next time?
1-minute teaser, huh? Let's see.
Yeah.
Okay. One, thank you all. Thank you, Lisa, and everyone, just like amazing. And we all are working on it. And I love what you said, Kenna, and you're doing a great job as a chair, I think. So we're all learning, and I know we're all passionate, and we'll get somewhere. So my teaser is the education committee. I think we've been thinking of ourselves as like the marketing team for climate change. It's like how to bring this to the public and make it sexy and engaging and fun for everyone. And we have a piece on shaping like the perspective of interconnectivity through an art project that can engage all members of the community and can be displayed throughout the city, along with QR codes that people can click on that can give them both information, both inform and engage them on this issue in fun, positive ways. And we wanted to invite like a vision guild together to further flesh out that idea. So I guess we'll table that for next time.
That was a great teaser. I'm already excited to hear more.
Oh, and I didn't even show any skin. Great.
All right. So very quickly, is there any input from members regarding the next meeting agenda before we move on? I have on there, Woody has another bill to bring forward. We will need to discuss the council presentation that we'll be doing at the May 18th meeting. At some point, the gas station upgrade. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add to the agenda next time? And you should feel free to email me after if you think of something. Go ahead, Lisa.
Well, I don't know if we'll have time or not. It's not an urgent matter, but I'm wondering if we might want to discuss some updates and also issues with smart meters.
Yes, this is such an exciting time, and it'll be fun to put that on the agenda and see how many people show up to our meeting. So we're at 5 o'clock. There's 2 hands up. So I'm going to recognize each of you guys for 30 seconds and ask you to very briefly say what you need to say so we can let people go on time. Go ahead, Jerry.
Woody and I both asked, can we discuss what it means to have a climate emergency and how we change what we do in our city as a result of it? And just a fast question on the gas station update is, Carrie, what's the timeline on that? If we table this until next meeting, is there?
Well, we are tabling it. This meeting is ending. Okay. So, Woody, what was your hand up?
Mine was just to add gas station ordinance. The transportation committee did meet, and so there were 2 items. One was the bill, the other was a gas station ordinance for the agenda.
Okay. Thank you so much. And next time I will try to keep our agenda shorter so that we can really have a little more spaciousness for the working group reports. Alan, did you have something to say? You're muted.
I think Carrie and I were hoping to do the director's report real quick before we conclude.
Please.
Sorry, let me pull my notes again real quick. So the little piece I have is just kind of an update on the terms question we discussed last time. And Carrie, feel free to join in if I'm not capturing everything 100%. So with what we previously left off on, I believe we were recommending the motion itself was recommending to counseled for staggered terms and also pulling straws, but not necessarily a recommendation on the term, essentially how long the term is itself. And there was the straw poll supported showed that 10 out of the 12 of you supported 2-year terms and 6 out of the 12 of you supported 4-year terms. I think when I was discussing with Carrie, there is some interest in having either both 4-year and 2-year terms. Just because there's a lot of staff time that goes in with renoticing and posting and recruiting. Carrie, is there anything that I'm missing on that?
Yeah,
portion?
so I think the way I would explain it is it would be really helpful as we have on our other committees, and council even has staggered terms, so not everyone's term is up at the same time. And obviously with this committee, everyone at this point was appointed at the same time, and you all would have the same term if it was just kind of done that way. So staff agrees with the idea of staggering terms, makes a lot of sense from that. I did talk with the city clerk, assistant city manager, because of the time involved, and obviously many of you may know COVID was involved, but in terms of getting applications last round, it took a lot longer to get enough applications to fill all the slots. So if it makes sense to people to have 4-year terms, but we'd like to send out a survey. It sounded like some people were interested in 2-year terms, and I don't know what your individual commitment interest is or time ability to commit. I'm sure your interest is there, but the ability to commit time to see who would be interested in 2 years versus 4-year terms. If you'd be okay with a recommendation, or if council says 4 years for a term, and either draw straws to see who has 2 years, and then they would need to reapply versus the full 4-year term at this point, to get both the staggered but also an opportunity for people to and this is something we can send a survey out, or we can send an email to just reply directly to staff, so we can work with Kenna and see is there a natural fallout. Everyone thought they were signing up for a 1 year, they're okay with 2 years, or everyone wants to be on as long as possible, and then we can go from there.
All right, so I can work with you to try to gather the information about the individual members of the committee. But I don't think we want to try to have more discussion today.
Okay. No,
for that report. Joshua, did you have any action items to report out before we close?
Yeah, what I got for action items for today were that the issues related to SB 99 were kind of going back to Alan and Woody to essentially send a proposal to the energy working group for review, and presumably the energy working group would hopefully talk to us some about that at the next committee meeting or one of the further committee meetings. So that's one piece. On the equity framework, that too was sort of going back to the working group to incorporate today's feedback and generate another draft. And that's it.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your time and your commitment and your focus on a long afternoon meeting. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Diana, go ahead.
Bye.
Kenna, can we just say a sweet goodbye to Alan here?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Alan.
Bye, Alan.
Bye.
Bye. Have fun with life.
Everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We wish you weren't leaving.
Happy Easter.
Felt bad about leaving.
Well, have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, do
Make
have
it great.
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder, Diana.
Bye.
All right, so Joshua, did you see Luke's email that he can't meet after, and we'll put out some times for the weekend? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So you want to do it that way?
Yeah, because he can't. I just feel like the three of us need to, be in the
Sure.
same